So we've got some updated news about Paul Heyman and his departure as the executive director of Monday Night Raw. Now, it was a big story earlier this week. We've spoken about it several times, but with like with any of these stories, when there's a big departure from the executive side of things or the creative side of things, these stories come out in drips and drabs throughout the coming weeks and months, and there's certainly been a lot of reaction. Now, if you haven't heard the news, if you were living under a rock this week, Paul Heyman is no longer the executive director of Monday Night Raw. In an attempt to streamline and consolidate the WWE creative team, they have decided that Paul Heyman is just going to focus on his, quote, in-ring performances. He's going to wrestle John Cena in the future, next year's WrestleMania main event. And Bruce Pritchard, the executive director of SmackDown, will be taking over and overseeing the creative team for both shows. Now, we spoke a lot about this in depth throughout the week, so be sure to go follow us on all of our social media platforms, here on YouTube, on our website. We're talking about it, and whenever we hear news, we are reporting it. But there has been a lot of fallout to it, and a lot of people have been discussing a lot of stories. Now, it has been reported that AJ Styles I wouldn't say factors into Paul Heyman's departure, but Paul Heyman factors into why AJ Styles is now on SmackDown instead of Raw. Now, a couple of weeks ago, maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago, AJ Styles was traded to SmackDown, and at the time it appeared very, very random. It was it for future considerations tagline. No one really knew what that means, and everyone was like, well, AJ Styles is a big player on Monday Night Raw. Hadn't really hit the heights that he had previously on SmackDown. Of course, on SmackDown previously, he's a 2-time WWE champion. The last reign was nearly 365 days long. And when he went over to Raw, US champion a couple of times, feuded with a couple of underneath guys to make a babyface. Didn't work out. I think of Cedric Alexander, Ricochet, Humberto Carrillo. Look at their careers now. It looked like feuding with AJ Styles over the US championship was the kiss of death if you were an up-and-coming babyface last year. But then coming into WrestleMania this year, of course, he had the feud with The Undertaker, which was great. I thought the promos were great for that. It saw the return of the American badass, easy for me to say. And then pinnacle of it was the Boneyard match at WrestleMania. So I felt like AJ Styles was just getting his groove back on Monday Night Raw. However, then the Black Wednesday happened. Unfortunately, we had multiple superstars released from the WWE and NXT. Producers were furloughed, referees were fired too, because of the whole pandemic scenario and situation that we're living in at the moment. 2 of the names that were released were Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson from the OC. Now, to me, they were 2 of the most surprising names that were released. I didn't see that coming, considering the week prior, they were in the main event match of WrestleMania on night 1 in that aforementioned Boneyard match. They had interactions with The Undertaker. They were key players in that feud, but unfortunately, they were deemed as not necessary, and they were let go by Vince McMahon and the WWE. Now, previously, Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer had reported that AJ Styles was furious over Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson being released. Can you blame him? Can you blame him? I mean, of course, the duo were released as part of budget cuts due to the ongoing world pandemic. But by all accounts, apparently AJ Styles blamed Paul Heyman for not fighting over their departure. This is what is confusing for me. He is blaming Paul Heyman, saying Paul Heyman should have fought more for Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows to stay in the WWE. Now, I get it. They're obviously his friends. They were part of the crew that he came over to WWE with from New Japan, and he's spoken about feeling responsible for their departure and feeling a great loss after their departure. Now, some people have said previously he just wanted to move to SmackDown just to get away from the bad taste that all left in his mouth, and apparently there was more to it. He blamed Paul Heyman for their departure. He said they should have fought for Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows more. This is what confuses me here, is that the final call in any departure isn't Paul Heyman, it's Vince McMahon. Now, if AJ Styles wanted Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson to stay around more often, he should go to Vince McMahon. He should go to Vince McMahon, and he should hold Vince McMahon responsible. This isn't Paul Heyman's job to say, oh, you should keep him. Yes, he's the executive director of Raw. Yes, he could have said they're factored in to creative plans of AJ Styles, etc. I'm sure he did. But this isn't Paul Heyman's fault. It's Vince McMahon has the call. If AJ Styles has got a problem with anyone here, it shouldn't be Paul Heyman. It should be Vince McMahon. And to me, it doesn't make any sense. Now, the story just gets more confusing every week. We aren't quite sure for the reason why his move. AJ Styles is now the Intercontinental Champion. He beat Daniel Bryan this past week on SmackDown, and his reign is just beginning. His match with Daniel Bryan was absolutely fantastic. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. I thought it was great. But it's very strange. It's very strange. Drew McIntyre has since commented on the departure of Paul Heyman. He said, quote, "I don't know the ins and outs regarding creative. I get my creative and go from there. I figure out best what works for Drew McIntyre and the storyline. Regarding Paul Heyman, the character, that is very interesting for myself. The last time we interacted was going into WrestleMania against Brock Lesnar before I defeated him in 5 minutes in the main event. There may be things to happen down the line. Brock is lurking in the shadows. If he wants to get beat in 3 and 23 seconds this time..." Again, he's sticking very much in storyline there. I don't think he wants to put his foot in his mouth. It's very non-committal there. Drew McIntyre was a big project of Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman was the guy who really fought for Drew McIntyre, and him and Brock Lesnar made Drew McIntyre look like $1 million or $1 billion, if you're Fox, heading into WrestleMania, and certainly made him feel like much bigger of a star. And I do worry for Drew McIntyre in the future now, because a lot of these guys on Raw who were, quote, Paul Heyman guys are worried about the future that holds for them after Paul Heyman's departure, and can you blame them? I think personally Drew McIntyre is safe, but I'm sure he's annoyed. This is the guy that really, put a lot of stock and a lot of faith in him. He made him the champion for his brand, and the guy who is arguably his biggest advocate, pun intended, is now gone. It's got to be concerning. The fallout continues. By all accounts, the network themselves, the USA Network, which airs Monday Night Raw, is very happy about the change. This was another note by Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio. He noted that the network wasn't happy with the drop in ratings, but understood the reason. They knew months ago that this was a rebuilding period for Monday Night Raw. This takes time. Ratings are going to go down. They were promoting the Ruthless Aggression documentary series all those months ago. One of the first things you see on that advert is ratings are going to go down. Anytime you have to build new stars, it takes time for them to get over. Now, what they didn't predict is that the world would go into lockdown and we would have a worldwide pandemic on our hands. So ratings went down even more than just getting to 2 million or just over 2 million, which they were at previously. So was their hand kind of forced by it? Yes, but I think WWE should have held some form of compassion here. These are extraordinary circumstances that we're living in at the moment, and bizarre circumstances we're living at the moment. SmackDown ratings are going down. Ratings are going down for practically everything if it isn't cable news or network news. That's all people care about, is the world and the news at the moment. Professional wrestling just isn't as important at the moment, and can you blame them? That's not Paul Heyman's fault. Having Sheamus and Jeff Hardy on Monday Night Raw or whoever isn't going to bump up the ratings because it's not important at the moment. I don't blame Paul Heyman. Some of the creative decisions were questionable, but I mentioned this before. This isn't a Paul Heyman problem. This is a WWE and USA Network problem. That show being 3 hours just makes you drained to watch it. Watching something that's 3 hours every week, a 3-hour entertainment show every week, is impossible to watch. They've been dropping viewers for the longest time, and it will continue to happen as long as that show is 3 hours. USA Network can be furious that WWE decided to fire Paul Heyman, but they should also be furious with themselves, because they're the ones that are making the ratings die on that show by insisting and paying WWE a large amount of money to have that third hour. WWE doesn't want to do that third hour. The USA Network wants that third hour. The USA Network pays WWE handsomely to have a 3-hour show on Monday nights. They used to have the 2 hours. The only reason they've gone to 3 hours is because USA Network pays them a lot of money, because between those hours of 10 and 11, the ratings suck, but they're better than what USA Network would be doing usually at that time. And that's what USA Network cares about. Now, Raw ratings had been dropping week over week, but not a huge drop as they once did. But once they moved shows to the PC and no fans due to the pandemic, that's what it was. Now, for those wondering, Monday's episode of Raw has already been taped, so I don't think we're going to see any drastic changes from Monday's creative. But however, we have heard reports that Vince McMahon has already changed a couple of finishes from the Raw side of the Backlash pay-per-view. So we might see some differences coming out of Backlash, but we won't see anything on Monday night. It'll be the week following this on Monday Night Raw. We could see some big changes. Now, Heyman has originally said it could take 18 months or longer to build new stars, but Vince McMahon only gave him 12 months and a worldwide pandemic. I feel like Paul Heyman is the scapegoat here. I don't think my opinion on that hasn't changed. I think AJ Styles needs to talk to Vince McMahon, not hold Paul Heyman accountable for the loss of Kyle Anderson and Luke Gallows. Quite frankly, they weren't being used great on television anyway. So them going back to New Japan or going to Impact or going wherever is actually for the benefit of them. I think AJ Styles is just like Vince McMahon, using Paul Heyman as a scapegoat here. That's just my opinion, though, of course. What is your opinion on the Paul Heyman departure? What do you think about AJ Styles blaming Paul Heyman for the departure of Kyle Anderson and Luke Gallows? And what do you think about Vince McMahon firing Paul Heyman 12 months into a rebuilding process during a worldwide pandemic, when previously Paul Heyman said that it could take 18 months or longer to build new stars? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wrestling News 365. Follow us on all of our social media platforms on the screen right now. Enjoy Backlash tonight, and I'll speak with you again very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.